Chapter 15, Reconciling the Value Estimates. This chapter is a general review of appraisal, and here you have some of the different terms that you need to take a look at. What are our learning outcomes here? First, we're going to define reconciliation. We're going to explain why the appraiser must first review each value approach that he's used. We're going to explain why the appraiser reviews the data used in the approach and also show you how to round your final answer in your appraisal project. What is reconciliation? Reconciliation is the last phase of any valuation assignment in which two or more value indications derived from market data are resolved into a final value opinion. This opinion can be a range or it could be a single value. So we are going to look at a review of the overall appraisal process and a review for technical accuracy. In reviewing the data collected, there's three different things that you want to make sure are accurate. The type of the property that's being appraised. Have you accurately stated what type of property it is? Are you completing or have you completed the agreed to scope of work when you originally received your appraisal request? And do you have all of the intended users listed on the appraisal? In reviewing the appraisal process, there's 5 different points here. Have you precisely located and identified the property? Is it a single-family residence? Is it multifamily? Is it commercial? Is it industrial? Have you clearly defined the property rights to be appraised? Most of the time, as you know, it will be a fee simple right that you're appraising. It could possibly be a leased fee. The third is pinpoint the date when the value estimate applies. This is the date of appraisal, the date that the report is submitted. Have you given a formal definition of the type of value that you are stating? Now, you know most of the time it's market value, so have you stated that it's market value and given a definition for that? Have you clearly defined the intended use and the user of the appraisal in the report? So what is the report for? It's probably for a loan transaction. Who is the user? The lender. We're also going to do a technical review for your appraisal. In the technical review, the first thing that you're going to do is make sure that all of your calculations are checked for accuracy. Is your square footage accurate? Are all of your additions and subtractions accurate? Do you have all the correct numbers? The second part of the technical review is asking, is all of the data checked for completeness and accuracy? Is everything filled out? You know, on that very first sheet of the URAR that we took out to the subject property, it had all of those teeny tiny little options that you had to check. Make sure that everything on there is complete. The third part of the technical review is checking for consistency. We want to make sure that all of the adjustments that we have made are consistent across the board. So if you're adjusting for, say, a swimming pool, and you have determined that the adjustment for a swimming pool is $15,000, then every single time that you adjust for a swimming pool, you're going to use $15,000. So just make sure that all of those different adjustments that you are making are consistent. Now keep in mind, you're not going to see consistency when you're adjusting for square footage because you have to figure out the difference in the square footage between the subject property and the comparable. So that's the only place where that will be different. The last part of the technical review is considering any assumptions that you made during the appraisal. If you're using comparable properties that you have not actually been inside of, you're assuming that they're in the same condition as the subject. So reconsider that. Is that something that would be accurate? If you're using a comparable that's not in the same neighborhood as the house that you're appraising, then ask yourself, is the neighborhood comparable, or do I need to make an adjustment for that? Here you have your technical review checklist just to make sure everything is accurate. Do you have the correct calculations? Is your data complete and accurate? Are your adjustments consistent? And are your assumptions reasonable? If the answers are yes and you have everything complete, then you can move forward. We're arriving at our value conclusion. We've reviewed the appraisal. We've reconciled the value approaches. Which approaches did you use and are the numbers accurate? And then you round your answer. So some appraisal assignments will allow for a range of value, but most are going to give a single value of estimate. So we want to narrow it down to a single value. Now, Also, most of the time, they will round that number. So they typically round it to the fourth significant digit. Significant digits are those numbers that go from the first numeral on the left to the last numeral on the right that isn't a zero, okay? So if you're under $1 million valuation, you're usually going to see 4 significant digits. Reconciling the value approaches, we want to test for applicability. Are we using the correct approach? If it's for a loan, someone is buying a house, they're obtaining a loan for that, obviously the most applicable approach is sales comparison. If it's an income producing property, it's going to be the income approach. So we're making sure that we're using the correct approach. Is all of our data, is it quality data? Do we have enough data? Remember, whenever you're choosing comparable properties, the less adjustments, the more support for your analysis. We want comparable properties that are as similar to our subject in the beginning as they can possibly be. So the fewer adjustments that we're making, the less room for error for us. And then the range of indicated value. You're going to see that after you make your adjustments for the comparables, there will be a range. Your subject property value should fall within that range. If it doesn't, you've made a mistake somewhere. This is a great slide for review. You have the 3 different approaches to appraisal on the left. You have sales comparison, cost, and income. It then gives you the best application for each of those approaches. It also then shows you what the weaknesses are in those approaches as well. So make sure that you read over this, take a look at this, understand exactly what's going on within each of these approaches. Now we've talked about this range of value. The difference between the adjusted comparables, the adjusted sale prices of those comps, and what is the lowest amount and what is the highest amount of those. That is your range of value. Your subject property is going to fall in the middle of that. On the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, you have 2 different sections for reconciliation. So you've got this section here, which gives you the cost, the income, and the sales comparison method at the very top. And they're actually giving you values for each of the methods that were used in this particular report. Now, typically, you're not going to have all 3 done at the same time. Usually, you might have income and cost done, or you might have sales comparison and cost done, but typically, you're not going to have all 3 at once. The next part of this is your reconciliation, and this is where they're explaining how they came up with their answer, and then they're stating their final value opinion at the bottom. This is that second part of the reconciliation section that I was referring to. And if you look at the very, very bottom of this, this is where you're actually going to put the amount that you've concluded and the date of the value opinion. Now remember, we're always going to round our answer when we're doing a valuation under $1 million, which most of the time you are. You're always going to round your answer to the 4th significant digit. So you start on the left, and these are digits that are significant numbers other than 0, okay? So you might want to write these numbers down so that you can actually see the 2 examples that I'm about to give you. So let's say, for instance, we have a valuation and it comes out at $85,128. We're going to round that to the 4th significant digit, so we would round it to 85,130. So we have 4 significant digits and then we have a 0 at the end. Let's do another example. Let's say our valuation is $125,525, $125,525. We would then round that to the 4th significant digit from the left, so it would be rounded to $125,600. Here we have a summary of the reconciliation chapter. After a value indication has been reached for each of the relevant approaches, the appraiser usually must then reduce those separate value indications to a single estimate, and this process is called reconciliation. At the end of this process, a final value conclusion is normally reached. Arriving at a final conclusion involves a lot of different considerations. Once your conclusion has been reached, you will then want to consider rounding your answer.